Okay, in this section we're going to explore how to move the camera on the tripod. This is just by using a tripod and all the different things that one camera operator can do with just a camera and a tripod, and by changing the focus rather than zooming. That's the first shot right there that we're going to talk about. This is another shot, and we're going to talk about a bunch of series of other shots that we did at the same time while we were doing these two shots. We did a whole series of locations. This is the first location, just a couple of street sides that we did down in Los Angeles. Um, we selected this particular background because of all the different signs that said wrong way. And, it was kind of like a little subliminal thing in the story that, just to kind of tell the audience that we're trying to influence Jake's perspective on his life by making it seem like he's going the wrong way. Him looking at a building under construction, as though he's the one under construction. And it's just one of those subliminal things. It doesn't really make an impact on a person. They don't go, oh, okay, well, I get that the director is trying to say that Jake is under construction here. No, it's not like that. It's just one of those things where just by stopping and looking at a building like that, you can enhance the general ambiance and the general mood of a movie by putting in shots like that don't necessarily make a major impact or a major statement, but just sort of like little tiny little statements that all build up to a larger meaning in the end. And we shot all these little shots so that we can put them in throughout the movie, as Jake going out on little walks of introspection to kind of look inside and figure out what he's doing with his life. For instance, there's another example. We could have selected any location to shoot this at. It didn't have to be at this particular location, but I like the fence and the barbed wire on top, and him walking by the fence and the barbed wire as though that he's trying to cross across this threshold of fencing and barbed wire to get into another aspect of his life where he can actually become a writer. And it's just not happening for him. There's this big gate right there, and there's a huge fence, and it's just kind of preventing him from breaking through. And I shot that expressly for that purpose. I mean, when I shot it, I had that in mind. And you find that when you're being a filmmaker, when you're going out and shooting these little independent films, these little shots really make a huge difference, because you think that the audience doesn't get it, but they really do. Even if they don't get it on a conscious level, they get it on an unconscious level. Like I said, these are subliminal messages that you're transmitting to the audience. Just kind of telling them that you've really thought about this character, you've really thought about this movie, and you know exactly where it's headed and what you're trying to accomplish with it. And they get it, believe me. The audience is extremely intelligent, and they don't need to be spoon-fed things. If you put in little subliminal things, like, this is supposed to be Jake just walking to the bar. And if he's just walking the bar and he's walking through this neighborhood and there's nothing really much to it and he's just thinking about his life, you have a huge advantage as a filmmaker in that you can select any location at all that you want to subliminally influence your audience, by use of location, by use of setting, and that influences the mood in a huge degree. I also want to show you one thing here. When you're shooting and the sun is behind you, you're going to end up with situations like this, where you can see my shadow right there on his back. That's the camera right there. So you got to pay really close attention. You really can't see those very well in LCDs unless you pay really close to attention of exactly how you're shooting. Just be careful whenever the sun is behind you not to cast your camera shadow on the subject. So the way I cured it is by just going to a lower angle. And you can see there's a splotch on my lens right now. And I actually did not notice that until I got done filming all these little shots. And so that's one thing that you really want to pay a lot of attention to, is to clean your lens along the way as you're doing this. So this is a panning wide shot. This is just a camera on a tripod doing a full 180 degree pan from left to right. And notice how I'm keeping him in the same side of the frame until he crosses to the midpoint right there. Then I lead him out and I pan with him, and then I get him back to center. And these work okay just to kind of illustrate an environment. You can use panning wide shots to show an entire environment, like the location where he's walking at. But for independent filmmaking, they almost never work as well as medium shot or close-up tracking shots. A tracking shot is similar to a panning shot, except that you're pretty much tracking the subject like that, where you zoom in, you track the subject, and you get a good frame where you justify him to the left, and you give him a good face room to the right. That's called face room. And then you start racking your focus, and you keep changing your focus as he gets closer and closer, and it gets kind of really fast towards the end there. And then you pan with him as he passes you, and you get that wonderful kind of panning approach where the background is going so much faster than him, and it just gives you a sense of movement that a panning wide shot would never ever give you. However, it also does not illustrate the environment or the location like a panning wide shot, because it's primarily focused only on the subject. So when you want to draw attention to the subject, you go to a tracking medium shot or close up, and when you want to draw attention to the location or the setting, you go to a panning wide shot. Okay, the other thing we're going to talk about here is a tilt down. You can see how I'm at a lower angle than Jake right here, and as he's walking I'm just tilting down and panning to the right. What that allows you to do is to kind of create a sense of grandeur to the person, the subject that you're trying to glorify. As in the subject, Jake, is kind of larger than life, and he's carrying a lot of weight on his shoulders. So here's the tilt down again, and as you can see, it also allows you to illustrate the sky and kind of blend the subject into the sky as he first enters the frame. When we go to a slightly higher angle, we can still tilt down a little bit. As you can see when he kind of walks in right there, I'm still tilting down with him just a little bit and panning to the right, but it's not as profound as when you start at a much lower angle and tilt down and pan to the right. It just has a more of a sense of purpose when you're at a lower angle. Let's watch that again. Another thing I also want you to notice is that I stayed on the correct line of sight. I'm always on his right side of his body. When I'm doing all these moves, I never switch to the left side of his body. Notice how they cut very well together. It feels like he's always walking from left to right, of the frame. If I ever were to switch to the other side of his body, which is his left side in this case, he would start to look like he's walking from right to left. So it would kind of look like he's walking back and forth rather than straight to one location from left to right, left to right. And also I did a couple of cutaways, which is a cutaway of this plane right here. What a cutaway allows you to do is, as we discussed before, to pace your editing. Let's just say there was a glitch. Maybe he started one shot from left to right, and then at the end of that shot, he did something that wouldn't cut with the shot that you wanted to go to. You would insert a cutaway in order to make sure that you can kind of bond the two shots together without making it feel like there's a jump in the action or a jump in the time somehow. Now here's one more shot that's also a close-up tracking shot. We start on a close-up, we stay on a close-up the whole way through, and we try to rack the focus as we go. As you can see, he made some big movements on that one. So the next one, I asked him to make smaller movements and also to walk slower. That way I can continue to rack focus with him a little bit better, which is easier for me as a camera operator too. And as you can see, I was able to maintain focus a lot better than the last shot. And here's one last shot. And this one I had him walk really slowly, just so I can show you just how much easier it gets to maintain the focus the slower your subject gets. That's another aspect of blocking. The more you block your actor better, the easier of a time you're going to have as a camera operator. Okay, now let's talk about diagonal lines. The diagonal line he's about to walk on extends from near the left of the frame towards the right side of the frame. That is going to be a powerful line for you to add to your images to influence the audience, where he comes in and he kind of walks to the left and then finds the line right there that he wants to walk on and then starts to walk along the line. There's a lot of subliminal messages being created by this shot. First, he's being forced to walk along a line, and he looks like, because he's not succeeding as a writer, he's going to continue walking along the straight line for the rest of his life. But at the same time, when he comes into the shot and he leads the audience first to the right, then to the left, then to the right, it creates a little bit of confusion, which kind of also, is a peek into his mind, into the structure of his mind and what he's going through right now in his life. Let's watch that again. So what do we have in this shot? We have a very strong diagonal line that extends from the bottom left-hand corner of the frame all the way to the extreme right-hand side of the frame along the middle. Then we have a subject that walks into the shot heading in that same direction. But then as he progresses into the frame, he completely switches directions and walks towards the left side. That leads the audience's eye to the left side now, because no longer is the eye following that very strong diagonal line of energy that goes from the left to the right. Now it's following the other line that's created by the motion of the subject towards the left. Then he straightens out again and he walks towards the right side. and he kicks the rock. Now, what that does, it also forces the audience's attention to go back to looking down that strong, energetic diagonal line that goes from the bottom left to the top right. So what you're doing is you're creating a line of energy with the diagonal line from the bottom left to the top right. Then you're inserting the subject into the frame, twisting the audience's perception by taking their eye on a whole different path than when they were looking in, which causes discomfort, and then putting it back along, realigned with that original diagonal line. So putting it back the way it was supposed to be. So you're forcing the audience into a slight bit of a state of confusion, which in the end subliminally affects the perception of the scene, and they feel for the subject. They feel that this subject is going through a confusing time in his life. When you look at it in a grand perspective of all the shots that we just saw, the shot where he's walking by the barbed wire, the shot where he's kind of alone in the frame as he's walking towards the desolation of that construction area, and this shot right here, within 3 shots, that's all you did, 3 shots, you've kind of externalized the character's emotional state. What does that mean, to externalize the character's emotional state? You step into novel writing as opposed to filmmaking, which in a novel, you live in the character's mind. You know, you can read their thoughts, you can read about what they're thinking from moment to moment, whereas in filmmaking, you can't do that. In filmmaking, you have to illustrate the character's thought process by either dialogue or action, physical action, of course. So when you don't want to illustrate something by dialogue or physical action, and the audience already knows enough about this person's life to understand that they're going through a hard time, you want to externalize what they're feeling more by not the use of dialogue or physical action, but just by the use of form and framing and composition. That's how you do it. You take something that, you take an environment that the character is walking through, and you make that a voice for their internal machinery of their mind. And we just did it with 3 shots. That's all it is, just 3 shots. Just the one with the barbed wire, the one where he's walking through the construction zone, and the one where he's defined the logic of the diagonal lines. And you'll notice in all these shots that the character, I mean, this is something that we predicated, is walking away from the camera. And we discussed before that when a subject is walking away from the camera, he's diminishing in size, which means he's getting smaller in the frame as he walks away from the camera. Why isn't he walking towards the camera? We decided before that when a character or a subject walks towards the camera, they increase in size and that increases action. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make it feel that Jake is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller because of his problems. Those are choices that you exercise as a filmmaker. These are all definitely your choices. They're in your mind and in your hands as creative filmmaker. Framing, composition, and form in the screen, which is the form of the lines, diagonals, all that wraps up into itself. Instead of, you know, when somebody says when you can't tie a knot, tie a lot, that goes true for composition as well too. If you need 20 shots to illustrate someone's difficulty that they're having in their life, but you can do the same thing with 3 shots, do it in 3 shots. It's going to mean more to the audience to have 3 very well composed shots that mean something rather than 20 that don't really do anything and instead take away from the movie. So think about your shots, make sure that you think about them before you actually step into it. Make sure that they all have the same kind of mood, form, and appearance, and think about everything subliminally, because don't ever think that the audience is not going to get it. Even if they don't get it, like I said, on a conscious level, they're always going to get it on an unconscious level, subliminally. They're a very, very intelligent audience, and they're going to get it. So put in the clues, put in all those little hints and all the little bits of form and composition, because your audience will appreciate it.